You're good to proceed, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Rob. I'll call the meeting to order. Any declaration of interest, you can clear anytime you see fit during the meeting. I think I'll jump right into our delegation to Andrew. You're probably a very busy person, probably a lot busier than what we are. So I'm going to turn the meeting right over to you, Andrew.
Thanks very much, and good morning, everyone. I hope everyone had an enjoyable long weekend and a happy Thanksgiving. I'm going to share my screen here, and I'd kindly ask if you can just confirm it should be a full screen on your end that you're able to, that you see it? Okay, yep. Fantastic. So I have a brief update, just further to our previous update during the month of August in terms of what our activities have focused on and what the next steps will be for the project moving ahead. And so some of the key decisions I want to summarize this morning are the three decisions you see over here. So the first one was the approval to proceed with the request for proposals for a prime consultant. This process is still underway right now. The RFP officially closed last week, and the team are currently reviewing the results and submissions. And our next update with the task force will be with a recommendation to award to a prime. So that will be upcoming over the next few weeks. We've also made a decision, or excuse me, we have adjusted based on the decision by council to revise the scope of work, where we originally anticipated this to include both Rockwood Terrace as well as Grey Gables. We have subsequently made an adjustment so that the prime consultant scope of work focuses exclusively on Rockwood Terrace. Notwithstanding that decision, there would certainly be an opportunity down the line if there is different direction provided to look at amending that scope, but for the time being, the fixed scope and the fixed price that has been requested from the prime consultant has been exclusively for Rockwood Terrace. And the third portion was to add to their scope of services some additional work to develop a conceptual master plan, or what we're saying up to one additional option in terms of how the campus of care could be of course, there is one concept that has already been developed by SHS and Salter Pilon that has the long-term care home located on the south end of the site. And so we have asked for up to one additional option just to make sure we can ascertain or are comfortable with the different options that may be available on the site for the purpose of review, approval, and then proceeding with the long-term care portion. In terms of overall schedule, I want to bring your attention to I'll say the last milestone, which is the first resident date. Right now is we're forecasting in July 2025, and there are a couple of changes from the last schedule that I would have presented. So those are the main things I'd like to talk through with you today. Just in terms of the legend and the color code over here, on top where you see H1 and H2, that's the first half and the second half for each of the years. And then any progress that has occurred is shown in green, and anything forecasted or that's ongoing is shown in blue. And so the two main items that have revised this timeline, if I can say that, has been, you'll see in the initiation and planning stage, there was a gap where we started preparing the documents and we were waiting for confirmation or direction from county to move forward with the request for proposals. So that's what you see as the gap between the green and the blue. That has been on the critical path, as I had indicated previously. So that obviously has an impact on the overall time frame, but not necessarily on any upfront costs by the project team, as it was for all purposes a pencil down period. Nevertheless, it does have an impact on the first resident date. So that's one contributing factor. The second piece I wanted to mention is just over the design development period, that additional work that we have requested in developing the conceptual master plan and the time for review and approval are the two factors right now that have led to a slight adjustment of the first resident date. So in terms of a project schedule, still in line with the ministry requirements of having this project complete and up and running in 2025. But I did want to comment on this, as it does represent a slight variation from the last update that was presented in August. In terms of the timeline, and now just going into a little bit more details about the prime consultant and where we are at, the activities that are highlighted in green are essentially activities that have been completed. If I go to the third one, the issue, the request for proposals, manage questions and answers, and issuing addenda, that was complete as of last Thursday afternoon when the RFP closed. So the work we have ahead is reviewing the submission. So we'll be doing that with a team from Colliers as well as an internal team from Grey County. We have an interview date that is set for October 25th with the shortlisted proponents. We will then have a chance to complete the evaluation and bring a recommendation memo to the task force in early November and November 4th. Excuse me, that would then support council approval of a decision by November 12th and a kickoff meeting with the successful proponent on November 15th. So all of these dates over here, other than the internal dates, have been shared with the prime consultant as part of the RFP process. So they are aware that the interviews would be on October 25th. So that date has been blocked by members from Colliers, the county, and the prime consultant proponents, as well as the kickoff date on November 15th, as we've been very clear that there's a lot of work. We need to hit the ground running, so to speak, with the design team and want to gain some momentum prior to the Christmas holidays. So these are dates that are part of the contract and that that we have planned for and booked. So we're very confident we'll be able to hit those dates.
Andrew, are you able to comment on what the interest was on the proposals coming in? Was there much?
Yeah. Well, my preference would be not to comment on this process unless Kim feels otherwise. I can say that there's more than one, but other than that, I'd like to just go through the process and not provide any other information, as this is public and we're still going through the process.
Okay, that's fair.
So that summarizes the brief update that I want to share with you today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Andrew. Any comments from committee members? Madam CEO, any comments? Oh,
no, I appreciate Andrew being here this morning. He's supposed to be on vacation this week. So in the time-honored great tradition, we'll bring people in to do things. And thank you so much. I think that the RFP process, I think from our perspective, worked really well. We had some questions from potential respondents and we were able to turn those around. There wasn't anything, I don't think, that was of great concern at all with the process. So all in all, I think we're in a good place.
thank you. Scott, go ahead. You, excuse me.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Andrew, for taking time off of your holiday schedule. I guess my questions, to staff and to the committee members, if the prime consultant is going to do an alternate conceptual master plan, are we certain that there's no way to repurpose the current Rockwood Terrace? I guess I can't help thinking about some of the the old hospital in Owen Sound, some of the schools that have been repurposed. And to me, a building built in 1984, it's hard to believe that it couldn't be repurposed somehow. So is there any way to to further look at that, or have we completely ruled that out altogether? I know that demolition costs have been presented to us, but I still struggle with that a little bit. So I guess my question is there a possibility of looking at it as repurposing, and is there any value to the county? Thanks.
I'll turn it over to Madam CEO.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. We have had, I think, at least twice that I can remember, contractors through that building, as well as Jerry Pilon. Perhaps what we could do would be to summarize the comments that we received from the various parties that have assessed the building and bring that back to this committee, just so we have it on the public record as to why it is that the recommendation that staff have received from those experts is that it's not a suitable candidate for redevelopment. It has to do with the way that the building is constructed and how complex it would be to undertake renovations. I think Anne Marie is here. I don't know, Anne Marie, if you're able to make any further comments on it beyond that, but that was my kind
Yeah.
of basic understanding, was the way the building is built doesn't
Yes,
allow
I agree,
to-
Kim. It is something to do with the construction of it and just going from what it currently is, even if you're looking into affordable, you're looking at probably going right back to new electrical, new plumbing, that sort of thing. And looking at it would have to be a number of rooms in order to equal one that would be large enough for an apartment building. We can bring back what Jerry Pilon had suggested for us. And I think that would probably provide a little bit more clarity on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Scott, did that answer your question?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think that would be helpful if that could be brought forward, the comments from the contractors, just so that we have it, on the public record that we, did thoroughly look at it. Because I think questions will be asked about, what appears to be a good building on the outside may not, from a cost standpoint. I think that's good information to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee members? Welcome, Christine.
Good morning, everyone. My apologies for being late, extremely late.
So there's no other questions for Andrew. Again, thank you for your update that you give us, and look forward to your next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if there are any questions afterwards, either through Madam CEO or yourself, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Andrew.
Bye now, everyone.
Hi, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So moving on for agenda, we're down to our redevelopment options analysis presentation. And Kim, I'm going to ask you who's going to present this.
I will present this, and there's it best if I share my screen for these slides?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Okay, there. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, so committee, I put together this proposal summary because of some questions that, as we started to work through the process as staff and consider all the the future phases of the work that was before us, I started to have some questions, and I thought it best to bring those questions back to this committee and talk through how it is that we might proceed. If you share the same questions that staff and I have, if you have any other questions that you think we should be considering as we move forward and think to the future beyond the long-term care facility itself. So I'll start off with just the current status, just to make sure that we're all together here. So our approved long-term care redevelopment project, so what the Ministry of Long-Term Care approved, was a 128-bed home as part of a campus of care. So in order to kind of understand what that involved, what it might cost, how it could be laid out, we retained SHS and Salter Pilon to provide us with a concept, and you saw that. That was for the whole site. It included the new long-term care home, 40 beds of assisted living, and 60 seniors apartments. The development under that proposal was meant to be phased. Phase 1 gets us the long-term care building and a large common area, and that would be complete and the residents would move in. Then the existing Rockwood Terrace building would be demolished, and then the assisted living and seniors apartments would be built as part of phase 2. We really haven't talked very much about what that phase 2 would look like. Colliers has been retained as the project manager for the long-term care home redevelopment, but not anything beyond that. And the RFP for the architect that Andrew just spoke to requests a detailed design for the long-term care home only, and a concept of what a layout could look like. as he said, they're both the existing one as well as a second one for our consideration. The long-term care construction budget is 45.5 million. And SHS and Salter Pilon priced the ASL, the assisted living and seniors housing, at those the construction projects at additional 47.6. And again, we have not made any concrete plans about how we might proceed with undertaking that development. So there's, just to refresh everyone's memory, there's the current proposed design that SHS and Salter Pilon gave to us. I don't know if I can use my pen. Is that picking up? Maybe not. No, I can't. So across the top of the screen, you see Sadler Street. This is Rock Street that goes down the right side, and this is South Street down at the bottom. You've got your long-term care home is down close to South Street. Your common area, large common area there of 20,000 square feet. And then above that, and this is where you get to the closer to where the existing Rockwood Terrace is, the assisted living and the seniors apartments. So what don't we know? What's the best way to complete the entire campus of care? Is the phased approach that we're kind of tentatively involved in right now, is that the most cost-effective and efficient way to undertake the whole project? Are there construction planning benefits, or construction or site planning benefits, I should say, to doing all of the construction at one time? Are there qualitative or quality of life considerations related to a single versus multiple construction phases? I think you can appreciate, right? If we take the phased approach, this site will be a construction site for many, many years. Is there a role at all for the private sector in this project, either on the financing side or operating the assisted living or the seniors apartments? And if there was a role for the private sector in this, would any of that be beneficial to the county? And I want to be very clear, I'm not talking about anything to do with long-term care here. This is just the future phases of the development. Who is best suited to operate the assisted living and rental parts of the campus? Neither one of those things are things that the county currently does. And so, you know, it may be smart for us to just take a look at what operating models are available to us. And finally, what are the long-term operating and life cycle costs we should be planning for? You know, right now we do 10-year capital forecasts, right? We think about the money that we'll need to be putting away to ensure that all of the assets that the county owns are appropriately maintained, and that there's money available to replace things as they go. We don't have a handle at all on what we should be looking at here. And again, I think it's important both for our future operating budgets as well as long-term capital that we understand what those costs look like.
Kim, may I ask you a question before you move on?
Of course, yes.
The first thought that came into my mind is these are all great questions, but one concern I have is on the overall complex, the campus of care, servicing for this major complex when it's start to finish. So we don't have to redo work we just did.
Exactly.
Are we looking at the overall necessary, what's the word, servicing and approach and how we bring stuff into this site from the start to the finish? Is this part of this idea?
Yes, I think we need, it will be critical from both a cost and an efficiency and overall operating, that we do have a clear understanding of what the end state here is, and what the capacity and the appropriate location are of all of those various servicing elements, your water, your wastewater, your gas lines, all those sorts of things. Like you wouldn't want to put them in to have to move them again.
And as long as their size coming from the source to the site.
Exactly.
And the other
Yes.
question we had, the first, we got the first concept of what this proposal would look like, the overall council care. Since we're moving forward with this, are we still confident that this first proposal idea is correct? Or are we going to expand on or look at different various ways for the whole site, or what's your thoughts?
Well, these are some of the very similar questions to the ones we started to ask ourselves. And, you know, should we be looking at other options? So at that point, if I do go to my next slide here, this is where we reached out and had some conversation with Andrew and the people from Colliers. So what you heard Andrew just say a moment ago was that in the RFP for the architect, the scope of the design work that the architect has been asked to undertake is the two concepts. Do your work based on the base case that SHS provided. Do a second concept that locates the campus of care north of South Street and west of Rock Street, but put it all in that space so that the whole thing can be built in that footprint without needing to demolish the existing Rockwood Terrace. Because if you can build it all at once, then that potentially eliminates the need for phasing. So that's the way. And so whether we do anything else at all with what the question that I'm asking you this morning, at least we have this information that will come back to us from the architect, because that's built into the RFP for the architect. The two concepts will have 2 floor plans for each concept and a high-level cost estimate for each as well. I think earlier on we had some discussion with Andrew about the floor plans and how space is utilized within the building. Some long-term care operators choose to go with a more compact footprint. There's not a lot of additional open space, and some operators choose to go in a different direction. And I think the numbers that Andrew has used in the past talked about anywhere between 700 and 1,000 square feet per bed. Now that's, you know, spread out over the whole home and all the different home areas, but those have a real impact on both the look and feel of the home, but as well the cost of construction. And so, yes.
Sir, I believe I've seen Christine's hand, excuse me, hand up.
Okay, go ahead.
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. So I really appreciate this dialogue. I think it's timely. And I was wondering, Kim, do we have an idea of, if we did everything all at once, what the time frame is? That 2025, and or do we meet it by 2024? Just a sense of time frame in terms of dealing with the phase in versus whatever we decide as the concept for time frame. Thank you.
Right. I think this is part of the work that we're asking Colliers to take on as an additional analysis for us. So if I can, I'll go to the next slide. So how do we answer those questions? We talked to Andrew, and then Andrew sat down with staff here and the Colliers Infrastructure Advisory Team. And this is really what the Infrastructure Advisory Team at Colliers does, is look at projects and assess how they can be how they best can be carried out, how they can be scoped, whether or not there's a role for any kind of private sector involvement on the financing side or elsewhere. So what the Infrastructure Advisory Group have provided to us is a proposal to do the following things. Look at the work that's been completed to date about the site, the concepts, the stakeholder consultation data that was undertaken by SHS and Salter. That's where that idea of 40 assisted living and 60 seniors apartments came from. Our housing needs assessment, as far as the need for some affordable housing, et cetera. So they were going to look at all of that work that's already been done, develop a couple of options for a whole campus based on the need, creating a cohesive site, costing and availability of funds, and then evaluate the development options based on 2 different ways to procure. Either the design bid build, which is the way we're proposing to do the long-term care home now, or a public-private partnership. They also would evaluate the impact of phased delivery. So the total project completed all at once versus in phasing, the cost differentials for one build versus phasing, what happens to your price as you go out into the future. If you are phasing and you're planning on undertaking work that's several years into the future, how do you get a handle on what's that likely to cost? So they'll give us a sense of that, and also talk about economies of scale, right? If you are doing it at one time, you have one mobilization, a number of things would only be done one time as part of the project. They would go out to market and talk to the larger entities that might be interested in either a single or phased approach, understand what the industry feels are challenges and opportunities, talk about risk transfer opportunities, public to private, or talk about this sort of thing. What we're talking about here is having the private sector potentially build some or all of this. And then, so they're upfronting all of the money, and then the county is leasing the buildings themselves back from the private sector. And, you know, given the amount of activity in the market right now, is there an appetite to undertake this project and get it done in a timely way? So they talk about potential funding sources, review and analyze the facility operating and life cycle costs, complete that qualitative and quantitative analysis about the things that we would need to be concerned of with regard to a single building versus multiple, and what the impact might be on the long-term care residents or other people living on the site, and then prepare and present a report. So Colliers can complete this information for us. They have put together a team, and then you have the proposal in your package over the next 4 months, and come back to us with, I think, a pretty fulsome analysis to help us make some more decisions. And this would be an add-on, a change order to the existing Colliers contract, and the value of this work as they've proposed it is $75,000. So that would come from our redevelopment reserve. So
Kim, sorry to interrupt.
so I'm finished.
My overall thought of the council of care is that if we piecemeal it, have one architect, for instance, for the long-term care homes, then another architect comes in to do another part of the phase and so on. Do we not need one key architect or person that's going to look at the overall complex to put it all together? This is what it's going to look like when it's done, instead of piecemealing as we go along. In other words, having so many different ideas, should we not have one person, whether it be an architect or Colliers or whoever, looks at the overall proposal? This is what the county would like to see when it's done. It's sort of piecemealing all over the place. You understand what I'm trying to say?
I do. I think certainly the intent here is either through the work of the architect or through this, we're coming out of this process with one overall concept for the whole site. I think where you get into some concerns or some additional requirements is where you're building in phases and those buildings are attached to one another. You're going to have to complete the outside of the building envelope. And then when the next phase comes along, you're going to have to open up that building envelope and then add to it and move on from there. So there are complexities around all the most basic things like plumbing and electrical and just ensuring that the building envelope itself is exactly what you want and is going to stand up for the many years that we want these buildings to be in service to us. One of the other things that we've asked for is a net zero proposal for the development of the buildings. And again, I have some concerns about whether or not we would be impacting our ability to achieve that net zero in a cost-effective way if we're building this in pieces or piecemeal. It's not clear to me whether or not the buildings must be joined together. Certainly SHS and Salter talked about that and talked about people wanting to be able to move through the buildings without having to go outside. So that was part of the reason why they were joined one to another. Is there some consideration for having individual buildings where you do have to travel outside in order to move from one to another? And there's pros and cons to all of those things.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Any questions from our committee? Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Dwight. So essentially, I'm thinking that if we proceed with the recommendation here, we're going to ask Colliers to redo some of the work that Salter Pilon has already done, because we've already got a recommendation from Salter Pilon, have we not, to approach the project in a certain way. And I can appreciate the questions because it's a big project, so there's going to be lots of questions, and there's lots of ways of doing it. And my concern is you've got one company saying, well, I think we should do it this way, and Dollars to Donuts, Colliers is going to come back and say, no, we think you should do it this way. Well, then the question almost becomes, well, let's ask a third company what they think. And it just goes on and on and on. At some point, we've got to make a decision to put the shovel in the ground. And I'm torn. I mean, I want to get this done, but I want to do it right, of course.
Right.
So
if I may,
give me your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, I don't think that the intent is for Colliers to redo work that's already been done. We have an option. We have a base analysis that's been done about needs and price points and all that sort of thing. That work exists, and Colliers intends or has been asked to use the work that already exists. The only thing that they're going to do is to look at a second option in addition to the one that we already have, because the one that we already have requires phasing. We need, in order to get away from the phasing, we would need to look at a second option that has all of it together in one spot and takes away the need to demolish the existing building before you could start the second phase.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Go ahead, Scott.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Kim, certainly a lot of questions there, and I don't think any of us have the answers to all of them. But I can't help but think, can we not rely a little bit more on our neighbors in Simcoe who have already went through this experience? I'm not sure if the Penetang campus of care was phased in or whether it was all built at one time, but they've got the business case for it. I mean, it's big numbers here. Taking on an added mortgage when there's actually revenue coming in, that certainly makes it a different scenario. But I would think Simcoe County has learned a lot of lessons in their development of the Penetang long-term care campus of care. So can we not rely on them or have our consultants, really drill down to, their experiences and, help that guide us along as we develop our campus of care, if we do?
I think part of what we're doing by working with Colliers is really trying to have the benefit of the experience that they have doing many of these kinds of projects. What we know is that some of the fundamentals in construction have changed significantly and quickly, and so some of the input costs and that Simcoe would have had at the time they developed Penetang, I don't know that we would have the same conditions in the market or with the companies that might be interested in doing the build. We also know from the work that SHS and Salter did that this is a very different market, and the amount of money that people are able or willing to pay for their rent in either assisted living or in seniors apartments is quite different. And so that kind of has an impact on the design of the facility and how much you want to invest into it if you're hoping to have a return in future years. Our rental rates, although they've increased markedly, are not what they are in Simcoe County. Again, we know that Simcoe started down a road with the way that the business model that they intended to use for that project. They tried it for a little while and then they had to change and brought everything in-house. So there's a lot of moving parts there. They originally had private sector contracts to operate portions of the site, and now that's all internal Simcoe County, like the restaurant and all that sort of thing. Like they're doing that all with their own staff. And I think that has an impact on the total cost of owning and operating a facility. So I don't at all disagree with you, Scott, that there are lots of learnings from Simcoe County. And I know that Jen Cornell has reached out to her colleague director at Simcoe again, just to looking for the kind of the most current update from them. So we wouldn't want to discount that, but there's some unique considerations perhaps here. The market is so different and the times are quite different.
Thank you, Kim, for that. Scott, did I see you had a follow-up?
Yeah, no, I appreciate those comments, Kim. And, I'm not sure, there may be, other counties that have taken these sorts of undertakings. So it might be worthwhile to look at it, other counties to see what, their lessons have been. Simcoe is just the one that we've had presentations on. So it's the only one that I'm aware of, but there certainly may be other counties that are looking at this. And and I'm not sure of the market. I certainly know from experience that, it's about $4,000 a month, in Grey County for a retirement home bed. And I'm not sure what it is in Simcoe County. So thanks.
Kim, the question I have in my mind, and I don't seem to be able to get away from it. Picture we're trying to make a great, big, wonderful portrait of a campus of care when it's done. And you even mentioned it 2 or 3 times in your presentation. There's things that since we're in the very early stages, to make sure that we're not wasting money going through the process to get to the end result. And the big thing is, that's why I'm saying we need somebody, whether it be Cold or whatever, look at an overall complex housing here, long-term care there over the whole site, so that we I'm not saying we have to design the houses and so on right now, but we make a circle, that's where the house is going. So that if you do that, it gives you the opportunity to make sure you have all the right servicing coming in the right place, the right time, and even hooking onto an existing building. In the design itself, the architect knows that's doing that building can say that we know we're going to have a future addition coming here. He can make provision, he or she can make provisions for it. It's just, those are the questions I'm hoping that we could answer them right now. It's just saves a lot of money in the, it's a multi-million dollar complex at times all done.
Mhm.
It's just a comment.
Yes.
Ryan O'Leary, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of comments. Scott, you make a good point. I think anyone that's built a house or a commercial building or building a barn, you know, everyone asks the same question when it's done. You know, if I had to do this again, you know, what would I do different? And so I get your point with speaking with the other side, but I agree with Kim. Like this, Colliers has so much experience in almost every situation. I'm sure they've been through it all. And I don't think there's any question we'd save a ton of money by doing the entire project first and then tearing the building down at the end. There has to be a huge cost savings. We just need to know what that figure is to tell us whether it's worth the, you know, the risk of going that direction. So it certainly makes sense to me because, you know, like Kim said, you're going to build a new building and finish it. And then when you go to start the other one, you're going to undo what you've already done to carry on. And that part just doesn't make sense. So we need to find out the savings that we're going to pick up by doing the project all at once. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Brian. Other comments?
Mr. Chair, I see Warden Hicks and Councillor McQueen.
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the risk of repeating everything that's been said, because I think we're hitting the nail on the head now, Councillor O'Leary, I think quite right. I think this is me sort of speaking out loud or thinking out loud. We like the concept of a campus of care. And we have some sense of one option moving towards that sort of vision. One is phased. We're saying now, geez, there's another option potentially here, which is to do it all at once. And we would love to know from people who have expertise, what are the pros and cons of each, sort of a cost benefit analysis. And cost in terms of real dollars, but I think cost in terms of time, and I would say sort of social impact, you know, what is the impact on people of doing it phased versus all at once. So I think that's really the question that if I'm misunderstanding it, that's the question that we're wrestling with, right? And we're saying we would love to have somebody, well, our consultant, help us to weigh in on that and make a good decision around that, so that we don't come back later on and say, geez, why didn't we ask that question? We could have, right? Had we only asked. The other piece, Mr. Chairman, here, I guess I had a question about what exactly net zero means, because I'm not sure that in my head I fully understand that. And I think with respect to our climate change action plan, are there some things that we could and should be doing with respect to the environment when we're looking at such a major development? You know, for example, I see quite a number of parking spaces that would be required there. Does it make sense for us to think about electrifying some of those parking spaces, perhaps simply run the infrastructure so that it can be easily completed at a later time? And does net zero also include considerations around the collection and handling and maybe repurposing of roof water and maybe other initiatives?
Thank you. I'll let Randy speak to this a little bit. Randy's working directly with our climate change manager, and I know he has some thoughts. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And thank you for those comments, Mr. Warden, and questions with respect to that. And that's partly why, as part of an addenda to the RFP, we included some net zero analysis, just to so that we as staff, as well as this task force, are aware of what that could look like in terms of to be able to achieve net zero. And I think it's all the things that you've just mentioned that would have to be part of that analysis in terms of what options that would need to be explored to make sure that we're achieving that net zero. And speaking with our Linda Swanson, our new climate change manager, there's definitely some things right up front that can be incorporated into a new build that from a cost perspective may not cost a whole lot, but will help us to be able to achieve that net zero of that build rather than renovate after the fact. And so it's something that, you know, recognizing that we're hopefully getting close to finalizing the actual climate change action plan. And one of the recommendations in there and actions is to consider any new builds that are going forward, being able to achieve that net zero status. And like I said, in speaking with our climate change manager, there's some things that we can incorporate right up front into the design and to the actual materials that are used that will help us to achieve that, rather than we're going to be potentially then paying more in the future to renovate to achieve that net zero after the fact. So that's why we want to incorporate some of that as part of the prime consultants work and analysis, is to look at that through that lens, so that we have that information and can bring that back to the task force and make the decisions on when we get to the actual build and construction phases.
Thank you, Randy. And Mr. Warden?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Randy, does that also include the potential for electrification of parking spaces?
Yeah, I think it's part of it. It's looking at, like you said, do we need all those parking spaces? And is that something we have discussion with West Gray on, in terms of how much parking do we actually need? Or is there a different surface type that we can consider that's still sturdy enough, but it's something that can be actually achieving net zero? Because when you actually pave a parking lot, that counts against you in terms of from a net zero perspective. So there are things that we can explore as part of that analysis. And I think at minimum, I think you're right that making sure that the infrastructure is there to at least put in some charging stations. But to me, that's where we're going. That's where the industry's going. Auto manufacturers have indicated that by a certain year, they're only going to be providing electric vehicles. So we need to make sure that our new parking facilities that we're preparing are able to accommodate that. And so that's something that will have to be considered with the prime consultant for sure.
Thank you, Randy. Paul, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments. So looking at the suggestion of 128 bed facility, which we have approved, adding 40 beds of assisted living and seniors, 60 seniors apartment, is a really good concept. And I certainly, in the sense of like campus of care, and certainly I think Scott has mentioned the Simcoe County model, is that it helps offset the cost of long-term care in Simcoe County. My question is, Mr. Chair, is we just made a decision last month with regards to the overall cost of our ability to borrow. And if you're going from 45 million plus another 47 million, are we not back to that same argument of our initial outlay of cost? And it just behooves me to think that we're a month later looking at that kind of cost again, where we went through that agony of going through that part and putting another project on hold. I just scratched my head in the sense of that was the whole argument why we did what we did, and pausing on the long-term care of another project. So can we just have that conversation a little bit in the sense of looking at that? We have that report that we can only spend 10% of our in our ability to borrow, and then now we're looking at that all over again. So I only raise that because from a viewing public, they see that going, wait a minute. And I don't disagree about moving forward with your plan in the sense of of having a proper plan moving forward. I mean, I don't think we'd be criticized on that. It just, the fundamentals of our discussion here from a month ago just seems to be a 180.
Thanks, Paul. Good, excellent comments. Kim, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for raising that point, Councillor McQueen. When Mary Lou made her presentation to council about our long-term funding outlook, she spoke to that point about the fact that we'd committed to a campus of care and we didn't have a plan for how we were going to complete it or finance it. So I see this work as answering that question about, is there a way to finance what we've committed to the province around a whole campus of care on this site? Is there a way to engage with the private sector to have private sector play a role in some or part of this development, so that the county's debt repayment limit is not as impacted as it will be if we take on the whole project on our own. So we just need to ask the question, and that's what this project is, or this proposal is meant to do, is to look and see whether or not there are alternative ways of getting this project done in a way that would not leave the county as constrained financially as it will if we take the whole thing on ourselves. The bottom line is this is what we told the province we were going to do when we made application for the project, was to put together a campus of care. If it turns out that it's not affordable, then we would need to adjust, because the definition of campus of care is not detailed. We could make some adjustments to what that looked like, perhaps scoping it differently to better suit the budget that we have available. But again, this is meant to look at those numbers and provide this group and council with some information to think about.
Thank you, Kim. Paul, follow up, go ahead.
Well, thank you. And you know, fundamentally, we know there's huge demands of long-term care, senior living, and assisted living. I mean, that was some of the things I was asking about. The Grey Gables thing was doing that report and having that fundamental assessment done to the feasibility. I'm not going to go down that road right now. I just find it frustrating that we went through that a month ago, and here we're looking at, which makes sense. You want to see the overall funding formula, whether it's private partners or you know, the 3 Ps or whatever. You want to look at all that stuff. I totally agree with that, for sure. It's just that, do we need, you know, people have said to me, should Grey County not be doing a bigger, looking at this in a bigger picture, is what is Grey County in the bigger scheme of things, what should we be doing? And the bigger part of all this stuff. I think campus of care, I mean, we had that presentation from us, was it in 2020? I think it was July, what Simcoe County's been doing. I mean, it's working. Obviously today, you know, the whole idea around new building, new design is going to be electrification. I mean, that's the big key thing, is the warden is saying. I mean, you hear it, it's all over, you know, talking about climate change. There's so much stuff talking about that. It's just, I'm not sure when that's all going to roll, because you got to have electricity to be mass produced in order you to electrify everything, because it's not there. The infrastructure is not there. So, you know, there's a lot of discussion points here and all that point, but so what you're saying is, Mr. Chair, through you, is $75,000 will give us those answers. Is that basically the question here? Is if we spend the 75,000, that will give us all those questions, all those answers to those questions of all the options that could be presented for this project. Is that basically what we're asking here?
Madam CEO, I don't think it'll answer all our questions, but go ahead.
Thank you. As I outlined in the presentation, Collier's work as part of this proposal would answer many of those questions that we have with regard to phasing versus a single build. What's the role for the private sector, if any, either in financing the project, in operating it in the future? What would that look like as far as an impact on Grey County's capital budget and debt repayment limit? Also our long-term operating costs. So that's the information that they're going to come back to us with and help us to understand. Like, we don't do these big construction projects every day. And we need to understand what it is that the market is looking for. Where are we going to get, I mean, you can get anybody to do anything if you pay them enough money. But I don't think that that's the situation that we're in right now. We're trying to control our costs. At the same time, we're trying to develop a really excellent product. And I'm saying that given the lack of expertise and experience that we have as Grey County in undertaking that it would be wise to go out and get these questions answered by somebody who does this work every day.
Thank you, Madam Theo. Before I go back to Paul, Madam Clerk, I guess I need some direction from you. How do we handle this change order of $75,000? Do we need to pass a motion by the committee, or?
Yes, sir. Once the discussion has finished, I do have a resolution I'd be happy to read to the members.
Cool, thank you. Paul, did you have a follow-up?
Just an overall comment to say that, I mean, we as Grey County Council have decided that we're going to cap ourselves at the 10% level, which I think for certain projects or capital, I think it's wrong. But I will say is 45 million for Rockwood Terrace and 47 million for assisted and senior living. I think the public's going to say senior assisted living or another long-term care. I think that's the thing that's going to come back to us, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Paul. Do I see any other discussions? Scott, go ahead.
No, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say that I certainly support, spending this money to try and answer some of the questions, because they are a lot of valid questions. At the end of the day, I've been a strong supporter of a campus to care, primarily for the fact that I want to see, if one loved one is in long-term care, I'd like to see the other one have the availability of living close by. So whether that is a private, retirement home or whether it's a public one, there's lots of good retirement homes out there, and individuals buy based on that type of care they're getting. And in retirement homes, you can purchase the type of care that you want. So just having that availability to have loved ones near one another, that's what I want to see at the end of the day. And, I think the questions that Kim is posing to us are very pertinent, and $75,000 will help the committee answer those questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Madam Clerk, I'll ask you to read that motion, put it on the floor, and if we want to have better discussion, we can after.
Of course. The motion is that staff be authorized to issue a change order to the Colliers Project Management Contract to complete a comprehensive feasibility study for the redevelopment of Rockwood Terrace Campus of Care at a cost of $75,000, and that the funds for this report come from the redevelopment reserve.
Thank you, Heather. Do I have something to move to put on the floor, please? Moved by Brian O'Leary, second by Mr. Warden. Is there any other discussion on this motion before us? Before I ask for the vote on the motion, Madam Clerk, will be a recommendation going back to County Council for final approval?
Yes, it will. The redevelopment minutes go directly to County Council, and those will go on the 28th.
Okay, thank you.
I will note, Mr. Chair, that Councillor Robinson doesn't appear to be with us back from her meeting yet, so she won't be voting on the matter.
Okay. So there's no other discussion on the motion before us. Can All in favor of the motion before us? Throw of hands, I guess. The motion is carried. Thank you for putting that motion together for us, Heather. So I guess we'll move on to our next item. I've lost my screen. I believe our next item is update on the feasibility study for Grey Gables. And Madam Clerk, were you going to do that?
Actually, Randy is going to do that.
Sorry, Randy. See if I can get my
Okay.
screen back.
Thank you, Chair
Sorry.
Burley. So just wanted to provide a quick update on the Grey Gables Campus of Care feasibility study. So the study has been delayed as the concept plan for the future redevelopment of Grey Gables took longer than originally anticipated. SHS received that concept plan from Salter Pilon last week. SHS has noted that they would require a couple weeks from receiving that concept plan to finalize the market sounding and finalizing the pro forma. So we anticipate that we'll be receiving a final draft of the phase 2 report before the end of this month. Once received, of course, staff will review, and if everything's in order, we will bring that forward to the task force, which we are hoping to do so before the end of the year, for sure. So I just wanted to provide an update in terms of where we're at with that campus of care feasibility study. There was a bit of a delay on the concept plan. We now have that in draft form that's been provided to SHS. So now they'll be able to finalize that report and we'll be able to bring that back to the task force.
Thank you, Randy. Any questions or comments? Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand they're doing some public consultation on that as well, which is great. And so I guess that's sort of adding to the report to be coming by the end of the month. So
exactly.
I guess it's called stakeholders.
Correct. Yeah. So there's been some key stakeholder connections. I think some SHS has already connected with some, and I think there's still some more to do. And as well as contacting some of the existing tenants within Grey Gables, just to understand what their future plans are, so that they can incorporate that as part of some of the options that they'll be presenting back to this task force in terms of what that Grey Gables redevelopment could look like. So that's going to be all packaged up in the report. We'll present that back to the task force, hopefully in the very near future.
Thank you,
Just a
Randy.
follow-up.
Look
Just a
forward to
follow-up.
that report. Go ahead, Paul.
As I recall earlier in the early days that they were going to probably speak to Grey Highlands employees or that type of thing with regards to infrastructure. And I think also probably with the hospital itself as well, or staff around the hospital construction, I would think as well, right?
That's correct. Yes, they were part of that stakeholder list. So they will be either have consulted already or will be as part of the finalization of the report for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. I guess that was just an update information for the committee. So look forward to your report coming back. So I guess I'll move on to the agenda. Do we have any other business here today? Scott, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I forgot to ask this question, but either to Kim or Randy, when Colliers now goes ahead, is one of the questions going, I didn't see the question about, the further development of the overall property. I think, based on the sketch we're looking at, maybe 10 acres out of a possible, I think it's 32 acres. So not sure, Randy, if you've had any thoughts, looking forward about the other 22 acres, and how that could be developed up the road.
Yeah, through you. I think for sure on the servicing side, we want to make sure that, again, going back to if we're putting pipes in the ground, we want to make sure that the infrastructure can support not only the long-term care phasing and the overall campus of care on the west side of Rock Street, but what are some of the possible options when we get to the east side of things as well. So at this stage, that's not part of the scope necessarily of Collier's work, but recognizing that we do have 32 acres. So we have another 20 plus acres that we have some further options that we could explore going forward. So that's something that they're aware of at least, and making sure that the servicing aspects of when we're putting the infrastructure in the ground will be able to support any future development on the east lands east of Rock Street as well.
Thank you, Randy.
Yeah, thanks, Randy, because, I mean, I'm not sure, what the county has in mind, but, 22 acres in a settlement area, if we got it to a draft subdivision, even standpoint would be a fair bit of value. So we probably should be starting to think about it at some point, but getting that servicing in would be important. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Any other comments? Is there any other business? Seeing none, our next meeting is scheduled for November 4th, 9:30. So we've no other business here today. I need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Brian, moved by the Bryans. All in favor of adjournment?
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you
care.
all.
Al. See you Thursday.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.